The subject assigned today is a repetition of the past 4 talks that we have had on the remodeling of the economy, and it is pertinent to the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and the Islamic world per se. This talk today, we hope, is going to be summing up the points raised in the preceding 4 talks, and it will manifest in a forum which will be somewhat conclusive. The steps forward may revolve around question and answer sessions, group discussions, and the like. But for the moment, this talk is going to be on the summing up of the previous 4 talks on the modeling or the remodeling of the economy in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Now, we'll start from the word economy to begin with, and what we will see is there are 2 different models available on the planet. One is an economy modeled to serve the people, and the other is an economy modeled to serve an elite cult or people who have usurped power in a political environment, and they can be representative of landlords, industrialists, capitalists, or even government agencies like the armed forces, the civil bureaucracy, the judiciary, and there is an endless variety of usurpers. The Islamic model, therefore, is pertinent, irrespective of what may have been said about it and what may not have been said so far about it. It's pertinent because the model presents an ideology for governance that serves the people. So, I am going to be introducing a chart today explaining what is expected towards remodeling of the economy based on the Islamic ideology for starters, and this fishbone structure has the hook at the top representing just that. The hook represents the Islamic ideology on governance, which in effect means that it is an economy model to serve the people in place of any elite cult that has usurped the population, the natural resources, the human resources for their benefit. The big debate for centuries today has revolved around on how the world ought to be governed. And it is clear from the recipe presented for governance by Islam that there are 2 primary factors that determine governance, or that should determine governance. The natural resources of a politically defined territory and the human resources. The natural resources must serve the vital economic interest of the masses, i.e. the human resource, and the human resource must be responsible enough to consume the natural resources to an extent that they do not damage the ecological balance of the planet. When we look around us, we see a great breach in most countries, most political territories that do exist. And therefore, we need to vote for clear understanding that the ideological base for remodeling the economy has to rest with the Islamic ideology for the management of a political territory or for governance, both. In this particular chart, therefore, the hook at the top represents the supremacy and the bedrock of the model. We will come next to the head of the fish, and that has two primary functions. One is legislative, and the other is regulatory. All legislation has to be devised based on the ideology represented by the hook, and post-legislation, a regulatory regime to manage will have to be set in. So the function in this particular chart of the head of the fish, which is the unique selling point of the structure, is for legislative purposes and for the purposes of regulating the economy. We will therefore come to the next part of this particular presentation, and that is the main body of the fish and subsequently the tail. But before we leave the head, the aspect of legislation essentially revolves around the limitations predefined by the dictum in Islam. So we do not have a feature of permissive limits as may evolve in social orders, which we can see in the engineering of laws by Western jurists and legislators. We have the limits predefined, so legislation is contained, guaranteeing the liberties and guaranteeing the limits within which we need to operate, being judiciously protective of our liberties and respecting the liberties of others, but at no time permitting any form of economic oppression, dictation, or alien subservience. This legislation is extremely important because it determines the contours of your foreign policy and the benchmarks that are adopted for the purposes of regulating the economy on a judicious basis. Now, if we move to the rest of the body of the fish, we will see that there are two fundamental things which have to be adhered to: the natural resources in a political territory and the human resources in a political territory. The natural resources cannot be scavenged, but must be used for the benefit 100% of the natural resources that exist on the same political territory. Similarly, the protective health of the people, the human resource that exists within the boundaries of that political territory, are crucial and fundamental. That means their education, their healthcare, their food provision, their clothing, their shelter, their security needs have to be all be taken care of at the front end of known technology. So in political territories where the natural resources are shy, it is seen that the human resources kick in to meet the required standards and vice versa. Now, in the operative body of the fish, we will see that a central activity which makes up for the destination of an economy and which will make up for its vibrance, its independence, is there in the spine. If natural resources and human resources are the fundamental factors for the economy, then land is one such factor that cannot be made to serve as a revenue stream for any segment of society, because that, in effect, pushes the power centers into decadence, alien reliance, subjugation, and generally they become oppressive towards their own people. So, for the spine, Two things are fundamental. Number one, that land must belong to the state and must be paid for usage. This shifts the focus of the people from being laid back, inactive, to being productive, innovative, and towards enterprise. Land, absentee landlordism, therefore, is a prohibition in Islam. The other factor for the spine is productivity. When you take land away from the factors of production, i.e., land, labor, capital, enterprise, and you make it an avenue where you pay for usage, then productivity shoots up. That productivity goes to meet with the demand and requirement of revenue as a consequence of industrialization, trading, and intelligent management of resources, both human and natural. So productivity has to be freed from the captivity of any power center, and its liberty has to be protected by the forces that determine governance in any political area. Having achieved this, and through legislation, we will see that we will have a new social contract where governance will be in the hand of servants and the people will be actual stakeholders. They will need to perform, and their performance will be contained by legislation and will be auditable by the people for optimum results. We will also see a thrust standards, because then the economy gets exposed to global competition. If you don't produce something, whether services or products, which meet the quality standards globally, you will not survive. So standards will be an absolute necessity. In taking away land, as a revenue stream for any power base, what we are in effect going to be achieving is 100% urbanization, where the human resource of any political territory would live in urban areas that have all amenities, all facilities that support qualitative labor, that can produce, that can think, that can create, that can compete. "100% urbanization" will also mean here hyped up industrialization and optimization on all human activity, be it related to agriculture, to industries, to mining, to tourism, or to industrial production. Therefore, the quality paradigms would definitely get into place and would remain there, because without that, survival would become near impossible. It is proposed that the quality of your population, the human resource in a political territory, unless they match up with the quality of intelligence, quality of knowledge, with the rest of the world, the developed world, they are, in effect, judiciously speaking, in a state of slavery and subservience. The functioning of the state, which starts after legislation and on to the tail here, for all aspects of state function, will therefore be contained because of the ideology, because of the legislation, because of your mainstay of urbanization and freedom and productivity. All these aspects get regulated for their standards, for proficiency, and for their results, catapulting the economy into the first world league. The efficacy and merit of such a structure, again, because it is in consonance with the ideology of the state, will have a spillover effect globally, whether it is in Muslim countries or non-Muslim countries, irrespective. And therefore the tail represents trajectory for the model to be proliferated. The body of the fish represents a corporate Pakistan. The hook represents the ideology. The head represents legislation and regulation. And similarly, therefore, the merit of the entire initiative is represented here in the tail, where you have, or you will have, a new set of economic alliances globally that would want to replicate and collaborate with you as a union, as an economic union for their place in the world. This definitely will keep two types of governments and alien powers out of your borders. One, those whose economic model is based for their own benefit or for the benefit of an elite or a monolithic structure which feeds a handful, will keep the pirates and the marauders out, and will internally strengthen your position on the planet to move confidently forward. The efficacy of the model because of the product you create by unifying your natural resources with your human resources gets acceptability throughout a new set of players on the planet, and therefore your alliance, your political alliances will have a paradigm shift from what they are to what they can and will become. Based on this particular demograph of the proposed model for our economy, addressing land, labor, capital, and enterprise, we have to briefly touch upon their role, because that is the crux of the remodeling of the economy. To meet the levels of productivity in any economy, and therefore its vibrance, if land is taken away but is manifest as a corporate product, that means your urban units are quoted on the stock exchange, your mining areas are stock exchange companies, so are your industries, and so is your agriculture. Then putting these products on the international market, at least within the Muslim world, will create a great synergy that will enable economic strength to meet up and match any of its like at any level of development on the planet. With land taken care of, labor, if fiscally empowered, with all factors of education, of healthcare, of shelter, the like, will meet the production requirements within the political territory as the greatest impetus possible that an economy can seek or find. Empowering, fiscal empowerment of the population by the management of labor compensation meeting all these factors is therefore fundamental. It can be argued that the feudals will resist any plans for the land, including the armed forces, which have found it an easy source of revenue. And so will they resist the empowerment of a population, because from the current compensation of labor, the labor forces in Pakistan, by any reasonable standard, are enslaved. Notwithstanding, the general argument, which we have seen over 7 decades plus, is there are no resources. So the third factor in the modeling of the economy is a revision of our capital base, i.e. the medium of exchange. Linking the medium of exchange to imports, to exports, to a foreign currency is one of the most absurd forms, or one of the most absurd issues that have plagued the country, because the medium of exchange, if linked to anything other than a tangible, keeps you thoroughly, firmly colonized as you were 7.5 decades ago. It is for us to take the initiative and set the line and pace for a change. All factors of revolution, all factors of bloodshed, all factors of captivity of land and labor, notwithstanding, the medium of exchange and its ample availability to meet with the size of your population and the size of your development together is what is required, and therefore the medium of exchange essentially has to be linked to a tangible that we have, that we own, that is within our borders. And finally, if we have to address enterprise, then it cannot be subject to alien dictates of donors, and the consideration of feudal forces that inflict the economy in any which way. Enterprise has to be liberated from the dragnet of mafias, and more so, the bureaucracy, be it judicial, be it military, be it civil, bureaucracy and the politicians. It has to be merit-based, and it has to be totally independent. In remodeling the economy, therefore, if we follow the principles hitherto explained in the previous 4 talks and in this one more conclusively, I'm hopeful then we can see a very bright future for the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Thank you very much.